I came across a very weak argument against God and fine-tuning of the universe, and I just want to review it real quick.
The fine-tuning argument has a lot of problems with it. Now, essentially what it's saying is that the physical constants of the universe, like the cosmological constant, gravity, all these things, were configured and tuned to be this way so that God, who has desires and mental states, would want to create a world like this where beings could be alive and exhibit, moral values and traits. So the idea is that under theism, it's more likely that we'd expect this world because God wanted this world to exist in this way, versus atheism, which doesn't have that. Now, a lot of theists will want to say that the constants are so finely tuned in such a narrow range that this is remarkable. This screams design. The problem is that the constants, for example, the cosmological constant, could vary by 10 or 20 times than what we have today, and life could still exist in those universes.
So first of all, the fine-tuning argument isn't a theistic argument. It's an argument that scientists have created. Theists just use the argument because it benefits their side of the argument. And just to clarify what the fine-tuning argument is basically saying that the universe wouldn't exist the way that it exists if things would change just a slightly degree here and there, if the earth wasn't this close or far away from the sun, if the temperature in the atmosphere was slightly different, so on and so forth. But so far, the problem with his argument is that he's asserting that universes could exist even if we tweak things here and there. That is what I like to call conjecture. In other words, he's just chatting. There's absolutely no proof that any of that would exist. He's asserting that if we, and I'm assuming by we he means humans, could change things within our universe, we could create an entirely different universe that wouldn't require the fine-tuning of this one. Of course, there is no proof to any of this. This is all his imagination talking. But let's continue.
This is where the cosmological constant, or dark energy, is far greater, or even less, than what we have today. By 10 times, or at least 10 times. So it's not that narrow of a range that they're purporting it to be. And we can actually configure a universe that's more tuned for life by tweaking things like the cosmological constant, making it a little bit less, about 10-20% less. You can have a universe with more life. It'd be more time for universes to grow galaxies and stars and planet formation. That would be way better of a universe for life than this.
So again, he's just asserting something that has no proof to it, no backing at all. This is all his imagination speaking, and he's speaking as if it's a scientific fact.
Right? So we can actually tweak the constants a little bit more to make it more tuned for life. The electromagnetic forces, the nuclear forces, we can change those, make them a little bit stronger.
Who is we? Like humans? Is he saying humans could tweak the universe? Like, how could we do that, sir? So far, this entire video is just based off what he thinks we as humans could do to the universe that has absolutely no scientific backing to it whatsoever.
And you would have more complexity, more types of chemical bonding occur. But even more damaging than that is theist wants to assert that the prior probability for a universe being tuned under God is higher than one that's natural, a universe that's just purely natural without a God. Right, so when they're comparing these two hypotheses, they're just asserting that
I hate that atheists try to make it sound like naturalism is the opposite of theism. Theists don't believe that. Theists believes that God uses nature as a tool, not that nature exists absence of God, or that for God to exist, that means nature's natural process doesn't exist. He's just straw-manning the theistic position.
Tuning fits the God hypothesis more. Why? Why are we giving that to them? No, there's a naturalistic competitor.
Oh, naturalism is not a competitor to God. It's like saying a man couldn't build this house because hammers and nails could have been used to build this house. We believe that a man built the house with the hammers and nails, not void of the hammers and nails. Either he's straw-manning theism or he just doesn't understand it. I think he's straw-manning it.
To the God hypothesis, we can, posit some kind of eternal inflation. It's a perfectly physical, naturalistic mechanism that can yield different universes, like a Big Bang, like ours, And there's the other Big Bangs that yield different configurations of universes with the different physical constants. So if you're just comparing a bare design universe, one where there's just a god with a mental state that wants this one, versus a hypothesis of under naturalism where it's just there's no design but it's natural, when you're comparing these two hypotheses, they seem to be equal.
He's creating a false dichotomy of equality. The chance of this versus the chance of that is pretty similar. That's his argument. Scientists have already explained that the probability of this happening by chance is a trillionth on top of a trillionth on top of a trillionth to the 10th power. It's just so very highly unlikely and unrealistic, and he's sitting up here lying as if it's just, a 50-50 chance. It's a lie. Scientists have come up with that figure of the likelihood or less likelihood that this could have been created by chance, not theists.
Equally able to explain the universe. There's no reason why the God hypothesis is more weighted in terms of its credence. Another problem with this is that the fine-tuning argument kind of backfires on the theist when you invoke certain moral aspects to this. So typically many Christians, for example, want to suggest that God had a moral motivation to creating this universe, right? He wanted to establish a world where there's living moral agents who can yield moral value. And well, the problem with this is now that we have a God who can create any kind of universe it wants to, well, now it has access to different parameters. Now it can create a universe that's non-physical at all. There's no physical constants. There are no constraints in these types of universes with minds. So God could have created a non-physical world with minds in it.
So first of all, theists believe God did create a non-physical universe, or rather a non-physical realm, with minds of people that act within that realm. So it's not a matter of if God did, we believe God did. You just don't believe God did.
And these minds in these non-physical worlds could have been way more capable in terms of producing moral value or, fitting God's moral plans. For example, God could have created many more worlds that are different than ours with minds in those universes where moral value is extremely higher than.
He's just asserting what God could have done and presupposing what God could have done. The butterfly effect is real. If certain things wouldn't have occurred, certain things wouldn't have occurred. We believe disobedience occurred, and we are living in the butterfly effect of that disobedience. Had disobedience not taken place, yes, we would be living in an entirely different world. But because God gave us a world with particular parameters, once we violated those parameters, we get the product that we get based on our responses and disobedience. He's almost suggesting that God should have just gave us a world that no matter what we did, there would be a certain outcome. God didn't create that kind of world. He created the kind of world where if you went left, this is the kind of world we would have. Or if you went right, this is the kind of world we would have. So that's why we have the kind of world that we have.
In this world, right? He could have created worlds where, for example, their intelligence, their minds were far more intelligent than our minds. Or, the way that they interacted with each other was different, such that even more moral value would be discovered. So it actually now backfires on the theist because now it's more unlikely that God would create this universe where we are constrained physically by these physical constants versus a universe that he'd make that's non-physical. And
this is all assertion again. And it's just conjecture and imagination. Oh, God could have did this. God could have done that. Well, we don't know if God would have changed one thing over here, what would have become with the world over here. We don't know. He's speaking as if we do, but we don't.
Not constrained with moral value and all these things that God desires. So now naturalism seems far more likely. And it's because the theist is trying to tack on all these different hypotheses into one kind of. They're trying to add.
You literally just added a whole bunch of things. You just added on all these potential universes that could exist. Your entire argument was adding on things. And now you're calling out theists for adding on things. Your argument wouldn't even exist if adding on things wasn't a thing.
Add up all these things. God wants more value. He has desires. He has mental states. He has intuitions. When just get rid of all.
This argument didn't kind of fail. It completely failed. Maybe you have other arguments that are good, but this isn't one of them.